Well, good evening, everyone. And thank you all from the bottom of my heart for being here at this evening's reception and for your support to myself, Susie, and for Breast Cancer Now. I'd love to name you all individually, but there's simply too many of you. Yay. Friends, colleagues, campaigners, politicians, bankers with a B, and also my family as well. I'm very grateful to my father Rod and my brother Sam, somewhere at the back, who have joined us this evening from Yorkshire. The greatest county in the country. As you may have heard, mainly because I haven't shut up about it since Christmas, I'm running the London Marathon. Back in the spring of 2020, in the monotonous days of lockdown, my beautiful mum Mary received her second diagnosis of breast cancer. We were sitting in our kitchen, aimlessly stirring cups of tea, Yorkshire tea, not knowing what to think, when at one point I said, I'm going to have to run a bloody marathon now, and we both chuckled. We were fortunate that mum recovered over the following year after surgery and treatment. And we did many things as a family that seemed just 12 months prior a distant possibility. We went skiing, we had a huge house party, we got another Labrador, sorry Dad. She came to visit me in London a few times, and we even saw her be a Queen's torchbearer for the Commonwealth Games. But no marathon. And sadly, as many of you know, mum's cancer returned in autumn 2022, and she passed away on the 27th of December, only weeks later. And so here I am, just over a year later, wanting to make a difference. Not history, but a difference. One second. So much for not drinking before the marathon. Since Mum's death, I'm proud to say that my family has raised over £10,000 for cancer and Army Cadets charities. This builds on Mum's own legacy of service in her life. Mum was a commissioned officer in the Army and Combined Cadet Forces. And on one occasion, in order to support financially disadvantaged young cadets going on an adventure weekend, she and her colleagues cycled the 127-mile Liverpool to Leeds Canal. In the first 10 miles, Mum crashed and sprained her wrist. She got back on the bike, continued until the finish. And with that legacy, I really do not have an excuse. We've got an action-packed agenda this evening. Of course, it is fantastic to be joined by Susie Cleverly. Afterwards, my dear friend, hopefully, if he's arrived, my dear friend and former Lord Chancellor, the Right Honourable Sir Robert Buckland, KBE, KC, MP, OMFG, will be taking on will be taking on the role of auctioneer. We have some wonderful auction lots kindly donated by individuals and organisations that I can't wait to share with you. We'll also be hearing from the Right Honourable Chloe Smith MP about her breast cancer story. And finally, we're also privileged to have Baroness Delyth Morgan, CEO of Breast Cancer Now, with us to tell us how our financial support is being used by her brilliant organisation. We're also fortunate to be hosted tonight by Chamber UK and Q5 partners, who together have covered the costs of this event. And that means that 100% of your donations to attend this reception and all of the significant proceeds you will donate to tonight's auction will be going directly to Breast Cancer Now. I'd like to extend my thanks to Ben Howlett, CEO of Chamber UK, for believing in what was a rather drunken idea concocted over Christmas and making it a reality. And if there's anyone in tonight that may find themselves navigating a career change later in the year, Ben is more than willing to speak with you, because apparently he also used to be a politician. But this event aside, although research science and probably a bit of luck gave my mum an extra 20 years of life, most of it undisturbed by cancer, it nevertheless took her life at only 58. And so here's my plea. Many of you have contributed handsomely in order to attend tonight. Some of you haven't quite had chance yet. So I urge, beg, demand you all participate fully in tonight's auction and scan the QR codes dotted around the room to give whatever you can afford to Breast Cancer Now. Honestly, it will help me get across the finish line. That and the sweet, sweet sound of Murder on the Dance Floor. And with that, it's time for me to introduce our headline speaker for this evening. Of course, she needs no introduction, but please do let me say a few words. Having experienced diagnosis and treatment for breast cancer in the public eye over recent years, as the spouse of a senior cabinet minister in government, Susie has used her platform to spread awareness not only of her condition and how gruelling cancer treatment is, but also encouraging people to check themselves and be vigilant for signs and symptoms of breast cancer. It must have taken such courage and a personal cost to your privacy to have been this selfless in your experience of cancer, in your many media appearances and news articles, and also accompanying James in representation of our country at an international level. I can speak for everyone here in thanking you for that. I can also speak on behalf of my mum, reading your articles during her treatment for cancer, in the validation, comfort, and empathy that provided her. And of course, you've done it all while looking so effortlessly glamorous. We could only dream. I can't thank you enough for agreeing to speak this evening, Susie, and for being behind this event from the start. So please do give a very warm welcome to Susie Cleverly.
It's a great pleasure to be here tonight speaking to you all. And I can't see because I've got tears in my eyes. And to help raise awareness for breast cancer now. And I was really honoured to be asked by Ben to speak today. And I want to congratulate you, Ben, on all the hard work that you have been doing to raise awareness for breast cancer and to raise money for Breast Cancer Now. So thank you. And you're running the London Marathon, which is just incredible. It's amazing. And your mum would be so proud of you. And this evening, I'm going to tell you all a little bit about my cancer journey. I never thought that I would get cancer. I never believed that it would happen to me. But I was diagnosed with breast cancer in December 2021. A few years before that, I had been out walking my dogs with a friend, and she told me she had breast cancer. It was a very sad walk. There was lots of tears and hugs. But at the end of it, she urged me to go home and check myself. And so I did. But I didn't really know what I was doing. So I Googled, and good old Google popped up a whole load of information. And next to that information were a whole bunch of images. And one of those images was puckering of the skin. Now, I didn't know at the time that puckering of the skin was a sign for breast cancer. So I made a mental note and I carried on. And I continued to check myself for maybe 2-3 months. But life got in the way and foolishly I stopped. Roll on a couple of years, and luckily one morning I was about to get in my shower and I did an almighty stretch in front of my bathroom mirror. And as I came up out of my stretch, I glanced in the mirror, and there in front of me on my right breast was puckering of the skin, the same puckering of the skin that I'd seen on those Google images just 2 years before. So I knew instantly that that was a sign that I had to go to my GP. And that was on a Saturday morning. And on the Monday morning, I went to my GP and he told me that he suspected that it was cancer. And he referred me to Guy's. And 10 days later, I was, sure enough, diagnosed with breast cancer. And so my journey of cancer began. I was diagnosed initially with 2 types of breast cancer. They later found a third. I didn't even know at the time that there was more than one. Now, initially, I was in shock when my GP told me that he thought I had cancer, and I did cry. I cried a lot that day. But I soon realised later that same day that there was actually nothing that I could do about my situation except take it face on and just deal with it. And I say to people, it's like being on a roller coaster. You've just got to go with it. Don't try and fight it, because that's when you get hurt. And so that's what I did. I took my medication, I went to all of my appointments, and I did as I was told. And I started my treatment pretty much straight away with chemotherapy, which lasted for about 6 months. And it was actually, although at times really, really horrid, the chemo was actually also really quite interesting. As every time I had a chemo infusion, I would get a different side effect or a different reaction. And I never really knew what was going to happen to my body. And I watched my body adapt and change at every step of the way with every different medication that I took. And I would always be fine going into the cancer centre for my chemo, and I was fine coming out. But oh my word, 2 hours later, it would hit me like a train, and I would just have to go to bed. And I'd try and sleep through the horror. And sometimes that worked, but sometimes it didn't. And then the next day, I would wait for what delights were in store for me, for what the chemo that I was on at the time would deliver. And I had 3 different types of chemo in the end over that 6 months. And I had all sorts of side effects, many that were too revolting to actually mention to you this evening, but there's some things that I can. For example, I lost my hair. I lost all my hair. I was dangerously close to losing all my toenails and some of my fingernails. I got muscle cramps, sore hands, sore feet, mouth ulcers, a swollen face. I had hives, numb feet, nosebleeds, muscle aches, and the list just goes on and on and on. Now, people often ask me, what was my worst memory and my worst moment of my cancer days? So I'm going to tell you now, sorry. There was one particular day that I remember really, really clearly. It was a Thursday morning. I woke with a horrible headache. My nose was bleeding. My whole body ached. My mouth was so ulcerated it hurt to speak. And even drinking water was painful. Just putting a glass to my lips was excruciating. My face was the size of a football, and it was covered in hives that were infected, and I felt rotten and actually really, really quite sad. And that day, I called my cancer nurses, and they were amazing. My nurse acknowledged how bad it was for me, and then said that there was good news. And the good news was that all these things were not there to stay, and that they could give me medication for most of them. And that was exactly what I needed to hear at that time. I got my medication later that day, and I carried on. And sure enough, they did all fade away. And I was ready and armed with the medication for the next round of chemo. But ultimately, it was worth bearing all of these side effects and going through all the horrors, because obviously the alternative was not even a consideration. And so my journey continued. I had a mastectomy with immediate reconstruction in the summer of 2022, then followed radiotherapy for 3 weeks. And then I had Kadcyla. That's an immunotherapy, and I had that for 9 months. And I was put on the Kadcyla because when they did my mastectomy, that's when they found my 3rd type of breast cancer. And so they had to give me immunotherapy just to make sure that they got everything. And then that immunotherapy gave me a heart condition. So I was put on heart medication for 9 months. That's now been cleared up. But even with all of these side effects as well, it was worth it, as I'm still here. And now I've finished all my treatment, except tamoxifen that carries on for 10 years, but that's fine. And I'm getting back into my life. And I do feel lucky. I'm lucky because I found my breast cancer early. I'm lucky because 10 years ago, there wasn't a cure for one of the types of my breast cancer. I'm lucky because I caught it by accident. And I'm lucky because my friend had breast cancer and she told me to go home and check. She is now 5 years clear and she's doing really well. And I'm lucky because Breast Cancer Now do what they do. And it's thanks to the amazing research and the scientists and the doctors that I have been cured. And tonight is about raising awareness and raising money to help others now and in the future. So please spread the word, and tonight dig deep and give generously to help Ben along the way and run that marathon. So thank you.
I've just got a couple of quick things to say tonight. The first is thank you all for coming. It is so important that you're engaged in tonight's auction. You've heard from Susie, you've heard why this matters, you've heard from Ben and the impact this will have on his family for you all to support the marathon running. So keep on giving as you are giving. The piece I can add to that is that I too have had a very similar series of treatment to what Susie said. Mine began at the back end of that horrible year that was 2020. And frankly, the shit just kept on going. That is, as Susie has already set out, that is how it can feel. Now, the question is whether a set of tickets to the ENO would have made me feel any better during that. I don't know. But those of you who love opera are going to pay for lot 4, and that will make you feel better. The other thing we should all bear in mind is that actually cancer, in all of its forms, will strike 1 in 2 of us over our lifetimes. And that actually means that, in fact, all of us will come into contact, because it'll be our friends or our family if it's not us ourselves. And indeed, on just breast cancer alone, in the time we have been auctioning tonight, another woman somewhere in the UK will have got a diagnosis. So for all those women, and for all those men and women across the country, dig deep and give to this cause. It's a very, very important thing that you do, and make him run faster.
So it really is a privilege to have a chance just to say a few words. And at Breast Cancer Now, we have a very ambitious vision that by 2050, everyone who's diagnosed with breast cancer will live, but be supported to live well. And that, of course, is really ambitious, but we believe that looking back over time, as you've already heard from Susie and from Chloe, there has been really massive progress in the treatments and the options available to people diagnosed with breast cancer. And so we believe that if we can keep that progress going, if we can keep the momentum going, if we can accelerate that even, then we will achieve our vision. And Breast Cancer Now is a charity that is absolutely committed to funding the research that in some ways, can be the difficult stuff that other people don't want to do. But it's about absolutely understanding the fundamentals of all the different types of breast cancer. What's the biology? How can we target, really key changes that happen in those cells, whether they're genetic, environmental, all of that, and making sure that we can make absolutely the best efforts to come up with new, kinder, more effective treatments that will make that difference so that everyone diagnosed with breast cancer can live. At the moment, sadly, we do lose over 11,000 women to breast cancer each year. And there is good news that actually the survival for breast cancer has improved massively, but also the numbers of people diagnosed with breast cancer is going up. So you've got this kind of perfect storm going on where actually people living with breast cancer in breast cancer treatment are living longer, sometimes when it comes back. And you have secondary breast cancer, which is when breast cancer becomes incurable, but it is still treatable. We're seeing women with secondary breast cancer living longer and longer. So we are actually seeing that transformation from, a really acute diagnosis through to something that in the future you'll be able to live with. And it is so exciting. And there is so much more that we can do. And the funds that you raise will make a difference through our research centre that we have in partnership with the Institute of Cancer Research and the Royal Marsden Hospital. We also fund research in the major academic centres around the country, whether it's in Edinburgh or Manchester. So we really do work very closely with some of the best minds that we have in the UK, and that is recognised internationally. So be under no illusion. The science that is happening in this country is the best in the world, and we are really making a difference. And so you can feel very proud of the breast cancer research in this country. I did want to say also that one of the great things about the charity that I'm so proud of is that we're not only, and I don't mean, we're not just about trying to stop women dying of breast cancer, we're also about trying to help women live with breast cancer and live life as confidently and fully and supported as best we can. And that means we have a helpline, work with our clinical nurse specialists, we provide evidence-based information. We have the leaflets on breast checking. We have public health talks. We have great volunteers. I was talking to someone earlier on today who's acting as a volunteer for us. So we also provide what we call moving forward courses. So for women when they come to the end of their primary breast cancer treatment and thinking, oh my God, how do I get on with the rest of my life? If they want to, they can meet others in the same situation and get support from each other. And so that work that we do is really important, and that's all done in partnership with the NHS, and it's free for anyone who wants to use it. And that's also, in addition to the work that we do, working with corporate partners, with people like Asda, people like Marks and Spencer's, those kind of really important kind of women's brands to raise awareness of breast cancer as best we can, because, as we've already heard, having that diagnosis as early as possible really makes a difference. And breast cancer diagnosed at stage 1, for example, is almost 95 plus likely survival. So it's really, really valuable to raise awareness of breast cancer in the work that you do, to talk about it, to encourage people to go for screening if they're invited, so that if they are diagnosed, they're diagnosed very early and have access to the best possible treatment. So I'm going to stop in a minute, but I do want to say a huge thank you to all of you for coming. There's an awful lot going on in everyone's lives. There's so many other things that you could be doing. There's lots going on in politics. I can tell you're a very politically interested crowd, and there'll be so many things, other things that you could be doing, but you're not. You're here to support Ben and his campaign, to remember his mother and to raise funds for research and support, and to really make a difference. And we don't get a chance to make a difference very often in our lives, and it's a real privilege when we do, but sometimes it's hard. And having the support of your family and your friends and your colleagues makes all that difference. So just to say a huge thank you to Chamber, and also to Q5, and to all of you for helping to make this evening such an important success. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the networking and what looked like very copious amounts of alcohol. So I couldn't possibly say anything like that, but thank you, and thank you for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure to come and say hello to you all, and thank you for what you're doing.